The concrete slab groaned as the hydraulic press finally gave way, releasing a plume of stale, pressurized air that had been trapped beneath the earth since the height of the Cold War. Sergeant Kowalski tasted the shift in the atmosphere immediately, a metallic tang that coated the back of his throat like copper dust. Before we dive into the harrowing events of this mission, make sure you are subscribed to the Black Archive and have notifications enabled, as some truths are buried deeper than any bunker. Behind Kowalski stood Marek and Thorn, two soldiers whose steady breathing had been the only rhythm in the silence of the Siberian wilderness for the past 3 weeks. They were there to verify the structural integrity of Outpost 9, a facility that existed on no official maps, a subterranean scar left by a government that preferred to forget its own experiments. As they descended the rusted spiral staircase, the beam of Kowalski's tactical light cut through a darkness so dense it felt physical, pushing back shadows that seemed to recoil with a strange, liquid grace. The air was unnaturally cold here, a biting chill that ignored their thermal layers and settled directly into their marrow. It was supposed to be a routine sweep, a simple check of the atmospheric scrubbers and the integrity of the lead-lined containment doors, but the silence of the facility was not the silence of a tomb. It was the silence of a held breath. Thorn was the first to notice the acoustic anomaly. He cleared his throat to report the status of the secondary corridor, but when he spoke, his voice did not stop when he finished his sentence. It echoed, bouncing off the damp concrete walls and multiplying, repeating his words in a rhythmic, stuttering cadence that sounded less like a reflection of sound and more like a chorus of mimicry. Kowalski signaled for them to stop moving, raising a hand to silence the clatter of their gear. He spoke a command, his voice firm and authoritative, but the bunker threw the sound back at him for times, each repetition growing progressively lower in pitch, until the final iteration sounded like a gargled, distorted imitation of his own tone. It was as if the architecture itself was learning how to speak, studying the frequency, the timbre, and the inflection of their lives. Marek stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the long, flickering hallway ahead. He thought he saw a flicker of movement at the periphery of his vision, a sudden shift in the light that didn't align with the movements of his companions. He blinked, expecting to see a shadow or a trick of the optic nerve. But the hallway remained stubbornly empty, or so he thought. As they pushed deeper into the facility, the feeling of being watched became overwhelming. A prickling sensation at the back of the neck that suggested they were intruders in a place that had already anticipated their arrival. The air grew thicker, heavy with the scent of ozone and something sweet, like rotting lilies. They reached the sub-level junction, where the light from Kowalski's lamp caught a figure standing at the end of the corridor. It was Thorn, but Thorn was standing 5 feet behind Kowalski, his weapon raised, his eyes wide with a confusion that mirrored the sergeant's own. The figure at the end of the hall did not turn round. It simply stood there, a perfectly rendered duplicate of their comrade, mirroring his posture, his gear, and even the slight slouch he had developed from carrying his heavy pack. Kowalski froze, his finger hovering over the safety of his rifle. He did not call out, terrified that the bunker would warp his voice again, twisting it into something that might summon whatever lived in these walls. The duplicate Thorn slowly turned its head, displaying a face that was anatomically identical but vacant, devoid of any spark of consciousness, like a photograph of a person rather than the person themselves. The entity did not attack. It simply stepped into a dark, recessed doorway on the left and vanished into the gloom. Marek, shaking with a primal, instinctual fear, could not look away from the spot where the duplicate had stood. He felt a tugging sensation in his mind, a magnetic pull toward the dark room. He stepped forward, ignoring Kowalski's frantic hand signals to stay in formation. The air around the doorway hummed with a low-frequency vibration that rattled his teeth. Within the shadows of that room, he saw himself, not a reflection in a mirror, but a version of Marek sitting on a metal chair, staring at a static-filled monitor. This Marek looked up, his expression one of weary familiarity, and beckoned him closer. It was not a hostile gesture. It was an invitation. The duplicate spoke. The voice identical to Marek's own, yet stripped of its nerves and anxiety. It whispered that the mission never ended, that they had been down here for years, cycling through the hallways, repeating the same steps, and that the only way to break the loop was to step into the monitor's light and stop trying to. Leave. Marek felt his pulse racing, a frantic thumping in his ears that threatened to drown out the sound of his own breathing. He reached out, his fingers grazing the threshold of the darkroom, feeling a static discharge that felt like 1,000 needles pricking his skin. Kowalski lunged, grabbing Marek by the back of his tactical vest and dragging him backward with a brute force that sent both of them sprawling onto the cold concrete floor. The moment the connection was broken, the lights in the corridor surged with a blinding, white-hot intensity, and the sound of 1,000 overlapping voices filled the space, screaming in a chaotic, overlapping cacophony that defied human comprehension. Thorne was shouting, but his voice was lost in the roar of the bunker's protest. Kowalski scrambled to his feet, hauling Marek up, and shoved him toward the staircase. They didn't look back. They didn't verify the sweep, and they didn't care about the protocol. They sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors, guided only by the fading memory of the path they had taken. Well behind them, the walls seemed to ripple and flex, closing in like the throat of a giant organism. Every time they passed a doorway, they saw echoes of themselves, dozens of them standing in the shadows, watching them run with eyes that held no empathy, only a terrifying, hollow mirror of their own desperation. When they finally burst through the heavy blast door and into the freezing Siberian air, they didn't stop running until they reached the extraction point. Their lungs burning and their minds fracturing under the weight of what they had witnessed. The aftermath was clinical and terrifyingly efficient. Within 48 hours, the entrance to the bunker had been sealed with industrial-grade concrete and reinforced with layers of lead and steel. There was no recovery mission, no investigation into the anomalies, and no debriefing that involved the public. When Kowalski was finally pulled into a secure room at a command center in the middle of the night, he was met by officers whose faces were hidden by the dim lighting. Men who spoke with the cold detachment of those who were already aware of the horror that lived beneath the ice. They told him that Outpost 9 was never meant to be a military base, that it had been a containment vessel designed to keep something contained. Something that thrived on the presence of human consciousness. Something that could map a human mind and manifest it in the physical world. They didn't ask him what he saw. They told him. They told him that Marek was no longer a person in the eyes of the command, because he had seen his own duplicate, and the duplicate had seen him. The synchronization was complete, they said, and there was nothing left to do but seal it away. Marek was never seen again. He was officially listed as missing in action, lost in the inhospitable terrain of the Siberian tundra. But those who knew the truth understood that he was still down there, sitting in a dark room, staring at a static monitor, waiting for the next team to come and repeat the cycle. The bunker remains active, breathing in the dark, hungry for the next set of eyes to capture and the next set of voices to mimic. It is a place that defies the laws of physics and the boundaries of the soul, a place where the barrier between the self and the void is as thin as a whisper. We are told to fear the monsters in the dark, But we are rarely warned about the monsters that wear our own uniforms and speak with our own voices. The mission of the Black Archive is to document these anomalies, to pull the truth from the silence of history. But some mysteries are designed to consume those who look too closely. If you believe there are secrets that shouldn't be disturbed, or if you have ever felt the cold touch of a shadow that felt strangely familiar, leave a comment below. The archive is watching, and the truth, however distorted, is always waiting to be heard. The military authorities declared the site a total loss, a zone of absolute exclusion that even aerial surveillance drones were forbidden from crossing. They cited environmental hazards and structural instability. But the truth was far more chilling. The bunker was a predator, and it had been fed. As Kowalski sat in that final, silent room, listening to the hum of the ventilation system, he realized that the repeating echoes he had heard in that tunnel were not just his own voice, but the voices of every soldier who had gone before him. He was not the first, and he would not be the last, provided the world kept trying to peel back the layers of reality that were never meant to be disturbed. The bunker is still there, beneath the permafrost, holding onto its collection of souls, waiting for the day the concrete fails again. It is a monument to a Cold War that never ended, a war fought against an enemy that doesn't use weapons, but uses the very essence of who we are to populate the dark. You are now part of the history of Outpost 9, whether you believe it or not. The information is out there, shifting in the shadows, waiting for the next moment of curiosity to bloom into a permanent nightmare. Stay vigilant, stay skeptical of what lies beneath the surface, and remember that some doors are locked for a reason. If you value your reality, do not look for the echoes in the dark. The Black Archive will continue to monitor the fringes of human knowledge, but keep in mind that some archives are better left closed forever. The cost of knowing the truth is often a price that no soldier is truly prepared to pay. When you close your eyes tonight, listen closely to the silence and ask yourself if the echo you hear is truly your own. The story of SGT, Kowalski, is not a cautionary tale. It is a warning of the inevitable. The bunker remains, the duplicate waits, and the cycle of the archive continues, forever hungry for the next chapter of the unknown. Explore the rest of the channel for more classified accounts, and remember, in the Black Archive, nothing is ever truly forgotten. The phenomenon discovered at Outpost 9 is not an isolated anomaly confined to the frozen tundra of the Arctic Circle. It is merely the most documented manifestation of a broader, more insidious breach in the fabric of what humanity collectively identifies as history. Researchers working within the highest echelons of the Black Archive have begun to correlate the timeline of Kowalski's descent with similar, seemingly unconnected incidents spanning the globe. From the sudden disappearance of research teams in the subterranean catacombs beneath the Vatican to the inexplicable silence of deep-sea sonar rays near the Mariana Trench. The pattern is consistent. It is a form of parasitic temporal recursion. Something is feeding upon our attempts to chart the unknown, and in doing so, it leaves behind hollow shells of the very people who sought to illuminate the darkness. Consider the case of Dr. Reese Thorne, a lad physicist who spent 3 decades investigating the nature of non-local reality. His notes, recovered from a sealed vault in Geneva, suggest that the bunker in the Arctic was never a military installation in the traditional sense. It was a containment vessel, a concrete sarcophagus designed not to keep enemies out, but to suppress a localized fracture in the perception of cause and effect. Thorne theorized that human consciousness acts as a focal point for this anomaly. When a mind as sharp and disciplined as a soldier or a scientist focuses intently on uncovering a mystery, they inadvertently provide the energy required for the bunker to replicate them. It is a process of informational consumption, The entity, if it can be called, that requires the observer to witness it in order to solidify its own existence. You see it, and therefore it sees you, and in that fleeting moment of recognition, you are archived, duplicated, and discarded into the ventilation shuts of a reality that no longer requires your physical presence. This explains why the files on Outpost 9 remain so fragmented. Every time an agent of the archive approaches the site, the data they collect is tainted by their own impending assimilation. We are reading the accounts of ghosts who have not yet realized they are dead. The photographs recovered from the bunker, which initially showed empty hallways and dust-covered machinery, have begun to change over the months. In the most recent scans, silhouettes have started appearing in the background of the images. They are not standing still. They are moving, blurred by a motion that implies a frantic, eternal search for an exit that does not exist. These figures possess the exact biometrics of the missing personnel, right down to the microscopic scars and dental records. Yet the DNA samples we managed to extract from the lingering biological residue inside the facility show a fundamental corruption. The base pairs are rearranged, forming a helical structure that defies standard biological science. They have been rewritten, repurposed into a language that we lack the capacity to translate. The implication for those of us watching from the outside is terrifying. If the bunker is a prototype for a wider phenomenon, then reality itself is prone to corruption whenever it is scrutinized too closely. We are currently analyzing reports from rural provinces in Eastern Europe where entire villages have been reported as having never existed, despite tax records and census data proving otherwise. The people there simply stopped being linked to our timeline. They were archived. They became part of the background radiation of a world that is losing its coherence. The archive's primary mission has shifted from discovery to mitigation. We are no longer trying to solve the mystery of the bunker. We are trying to ensure that the breach does not spread to the major population centers. We have quarantined the signal, silenced the shortwave radio frequencies that Kowalski used to broadcast his final logs, and enforced strict protocols against any unauthorized expeditions towards the permafrost. Yet, despite our best efforts, the curiosity remains. We receive anonymous tips every single day from amateur investigators who have mapped the coordinates of the bunker using satellite imagery. They post their findings on forums, sharing screenshots of the strange, geometric shadows that pulse in the snow. They do not understand that they are ringing a bell that cannot be unrung. They are inviting the gaze of the archive to turn toward them. I have seen the messages they write, the bold proclamations of truth-seekers who believe they are uncovering a government conspiracy, unaware that the conspiracy is far older and far more hungry than any human agency. They think they are pulling back a curtain to see the world, but they are actually pulling the world into the dark. Think of the silence following a loud noise. That fraction of a second where your brain processes what happened, where expectation meets reality, that is the window. The entities within the bunker do not wait for the noise. They live in the silence. They exist in the gaps of our understanding. Every time you lose your keys, every time you walk into a room and forget why you went there, every time you experience a sense of déjà vu so strong it leaves you dizzy, you are brushing against the fringe. Most of the time, it is a harmless interaction, a momentary glitch in the processing of your own life. But for people like Kowalski, the glitch became the entirety of their existence. He did not lose his mind. He lost his anchor to the objective world. He drifted into the substrata where the duplicate versions of us reside, waiting for the structural instability of the bunker to finally collapse completely. We know that the concrete is failing. Our latest sensors show a drop in atmospheric pressure within the bunker that cannot be explained. By seasonal shifts, the internal structure is beginning to bleed out into the surrounding landscape. The permafrost is melting not because of climate change, but because of the heat generated by the sheer quantity of discarded souls being processed within. It is a furnace, and we are the fuel. If you are reading this, you have already crossed the threshold of curiosity. You have consumed the narrative, and in doing so, you have allowed the story to find a home in your mind. From this point forward, you are a beacon. The archive will monitor, but we cannot protect you from what you have invited in. The bunker is not a place, it is a destiny. It is the final destination for every secret that was never meant to be told. When the last record is filed and the last soldier has been archived, the Black Archive will finally close its doors. But until that day, we must remain vigilant. We must continue to watch the shadows, even knowing that the shadows are watching us back with our own eyes. Do not go looking for the truth is a predator that has been waiting for you since the dawn of time. The silence is not empty, it is crowded. And if you hear your own voice calling your name from the dark, do not answer. The echo is not looking for a conversation, it is looking for a replacement. Stay away from the archives, stay away from the mysteries, and above all, stay away from the silence. Because once you enter the bunker, you never really leave. You just become another voice in the choir, screaming into the void, hoping that someone else will be foolish enough to listen. The cycle is absolute, the archive is eternal, and you are already part of it. Before you go, tell us in the comments what you think about this story. What do you believe was really waiting inside that bunker? And what would you have done if you were in the soldier's place? Would you have kept going deeper, or turned back the moment the echoes started answering in your own voice? And let us know where you're listening from to, your city, your state, or your country. We always love seeing how far these dark military stories travel, and it means a lot to know who's here with us tonight. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Here in the Military Dark Tales family, we always read the comments, and we do our best to reply whenever we can. Because this channel is not just about telling stories, it's about sharing them with people who feel the weight of them too. Thank you, family. And don't forget to watch the other videos on the channel. Here, we will never tell only one kind of story. We do this with love, and above all, we bring you stories we uncover from secret archives and forgotten shadows. Thank you for being here. Family, stay alert, and we'll see you in the next file.